Ms. Honorable, my name is Rebecca Barbish Levinson, and I am a resident of the District of Columbia. I am a homeowner on Capitol Hill, and I installed a 16 kilowatt solar system in the summer of 2024. After Pepco issued authorization to operate on July 24th, 2024, with the next billing cycle, I discovered that Pepco replaced our interval data from downloaded from Green Button data that reflected a credit of 538 kilowatt hours. They replaced that with falsified hourly usage data to reduce our net usage to only 54 kilowatt hour credit when they rendered the bill. In September 24, they similarly reduced the net usage from, I want to say like 500 down to 50 kilowatt hour credit. And at the time, I assumed it was a software glitch. I am an electrical and computer engineer. I have a background in patent litigation, including extensive experience at the International Trade Commission. In fact, I've worked with some of your former colleagues at Reed Smith on matters before. And so I just thought this was a software thing because it obviously happened on Pepco's side of the data. But when I called Pepco, they told me that it would be weeks before somebody from the GPC billing team would call me back. They said that they had no way to reach the team. There was no internal phone number available, even to customer service. I spoke with somebody on September 30th from the main customer service line. She even sent an email to GPC billing. And while I was on the phone with her, she actually read the message back to me. Um, I repeatedly tried to get a hold of GPC billing that week, but to no avail. So on October 2nd, 2024, I filed a complaint with the DC Public Service Commission. At that time, I assumed a meter reading was a meter reading, and I thought that I was actually going to help Pepco out by catching this software bug because it was obviously a billing thing. Um, but it wasn't a bug, it was actually intentional. And I didn't know that at the time, obviously, but um, 2 days after my complaint was filed, Petco's back office billing department disabled the interval readings on my account and pushed out a fraudulent July 2024 bill and disabled interval readings for billing purposes in order for Pepco to continue inflating my bill usage by 90%. Um, Nobody in Pepco would speak with me. When I told Aaron Ayler at the Office of Consumer Services at the DC Public Service Commission what had happened with the revised billing, he said, "Oh, Ms. Levinson, you're going to need a formal hearing. You're going to need to document this at an eighth grade level." And I had, no understanding what the process was, and I just trusted him. So I actually created a PowerPoint. I sent that to GPC Billing. I sent them an email on actually on October 1st. I sent them the PowerPoint on October 11th. I followed up again with GPC Billing and then called, I think it was on October 17th, and I spoke with Mr. Honesty, and that is his real name. It's funny, started out with Mr. Honesty, and now you're Ms. Honorable, and everything in between has been dishonest and dishonorable. But that's beside the point. And when I talked to him, he said he didn't know if anybody was ever going to call me back from GPC billing because they had resolved the issue. Um, And when I told Aaron Ayler at the Office of Consumer Services at the DPC Public Service Commission, he said to me, "What do you expect, Miss Levinson? You accused them of fraud." At the time, I didn't know that that Pepco actually has to call customers back, and I believed him. Um, so then Pepco issued a letter to the DC Public Service Commission on October 22nd. Um, and they didn't give me that letter. Neither did the Public Service Commission. If they had, I would have been able to recognize that Pepco didn't actually address anything in my complaint. Um, and instead, documents that Pepco produced in actually it was August 29th, 2025, after my formal hearing complaint had been pending for almost 7 months, produced documents that proved that um, whoever from the escalated investigations department stripped out the actual details of my complaints, and the GPC, the GPC team withheld all of that information, and they instructed Nadia Joyce in the billing back office to just update my unavailable readings for July and August, September 2024. And Linda Brown in escalated investigations said that my billing was fine. And I don't think that Nadia Joyce knew what she was doing, but when she had to pull the readings from the Itron Enterprise Edition, the IEE database, and she manually updated them in SAP. And when she went to run the bills, they still wouldn't run. So she contacted Advanced Technology, the AT team. And after that, she was able to run the bills. But an email exchange that occurred later in November 2024 showed that Ms. Joyce disabled interval billing on my account in order to push out these falsified bills. And at the same time, I don't know, Ms. Joyce updated the readings for June 25th, which is the start date of my July bill and the end date of my June bill. But there was a gap because Pepco intentionally programmed my meter to be off by a factor of 10 for the register reads when it set it up for now. And I know this to be true because Pepco produced the data in April 2025 when it answered, quote unquote, answered my complaint that once I got to the formal hearing stage. And so I have been now involved in this horrible process for 533 days. And today is the 10th day after the hearing officer issued an order dismissing my complaint based entirely on Kunle Adeyamo's, I mean, they're lies. Like, I'm an attorney. I don't say people lie, but he is a liar. He has no basis for anything he's saying. I mean, I have so many examples, which I will go into later. Um, I escalated these issues to Anne Bancroft after they couldn't get rid of me and I wouldn't stop asking questions. So they had to actually use OPC, my counsel, to silence me. And it is the most disgusting thing I've ever experienced. I mean, I've litigated against patent trolls. Nobody acts like this. And I keep saying, they can't do that. They can't do that. What? They can't do that. But they can because Pepco will never get caught. The DC government's too easily bought. I don't even know what's happening. And I mean, it is so offensive. They even did this like sham investigation in the FC 1050 case where they pretended on the record like they were going to investigate stuff. And then Pepco was going to respond in 15 days, but they could do it on box. So it wasn't on the record. And then what happened? Nothing. I already dropped it. I only found out through a FOIA request in August. Like, what is happening at Pepco? And what is happening at Pepco Holdings? I mean, Anne Bancroft knows all of this is going on. I sent her a PowerPoint on Christmas Eve because OPC sandbagged my case on December 12th, and I told her that. And she says, and her response, oh, Giuliani is handling this, and blah, 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 blah. And like, do you guys just condone billing fraud? I mean, literally, I had a question. I went through an informal hearing. Margaret Moskowitz sent Pepco 17 questions. Nobody spoke with me, by the way, between October 2nd, 2024, well, actually September 30th, when I called Pepco. October 2nd was my date of my informal complaint being filed. Pepco would not speak with me. It kept issuing revised billing. They changed their meter reading on my meter, like literally remotely changed that. And then Margaret Moskowitz finally escalated to her, and she sent Pepco 17 questions to be answered before the informal hearing. She actually sent them on New Year's Eve 2024, which I remember because I told her that she made my year because I had been treated so deplorably. Um, Erin Ayler in the Office of the Consumer Services actually withheld the responses that Pepco submitted on October 22nd, 2024, and on November 21st, 2024. I think presumptively that everybody just assumed that once the meter test happened, it was all going to go away. But I actually studied the meter manual and I knew all about the Aclara I210 Plus C and all of its capabilities. And so I wouldn't let them pull my meter. And the first question is, how can I actually verify the accuracy of our Pepco bills? Well, Pepco's answer was all the meter reading data used to issue the revised billing on 11/21/24 has been reviewed for accuracy and is deemed correct. So I just have to trust Pepco that it's right. After they originally ignored my complaint and tried to cover it up and issued falsified billing and had to keep fighting in order to get my credits back in November. And then they say that the after this, after the reprogramming, that the energy usage information on my account using the green button as the information has been confirmed to match the hourly meter reading data communicated from the meter, confirmed to match. Not as accurate, but it's confirmed to match. Um, the rest of the questions were insane, and we will talk about those later. But they provided the answers to me on January 22nd, 2025. The informal hearing was the next day. They gave me a nice, less than 24 hours to review the responses before the hearing, informal hearing. And during the informal hearing, there was somebody from GPC who was scribbling frantically as I explained what was going on, including the fact that Pepco is using a NEM agreement that does not comply with the commission's rules. The commission updated the rules, I think it was in 2021, showed that customers could go to 200% with a 20% increase annually, like up until 200 year by year. And at that time, they changed the payback to just being distribution generation rate only. It would be paid out in December. But Petco is still using the agreement from like 2015, and they're still using it today. And Pepco knows this. So this is like fraudulent inducement, but nobody cares because guess what? In DC, Pepco can't be sued under the Consumer Protection Act because the Court of Appeals in like 2009 made this bad decision that because DCRA can't sue because they don't have jurisdiction because the Public Service Commission has exclusive jurisdiction that consumers can't sue either. I know that that is up on appeal right now. Um, but it's like the most insane thing ever. Um, and the that informal hearing was the first time anybody at Pepco had spoken to me about my complaint since September 30th. And I just think that is so offensive because, like, the Consumer Bill of Rights says you guys have to talk to me. But no, nobody cares because they know the commission isn't going to ever enforce my rights. But see, the thing is that they tricked me when Aaron Ayler told me right after Pepco issued the first revised billing on October 4th that, by the way, you guys put only on the Pepco app, but not on the portal. And the only way I even figured that out was because on the portal, my last non-solar bill in June 2024 was there, and I could see some weird things that happened by downloading my green button data. So I downloaded the app and I found it there. So that was like nice secret billing. And of course, nobody spoke with me about that. Um, but there's so many more details to go into about those revised bills, but we'll just leave it at that for now. And then the commission actually made me file a formal hearing complaint and a petition for formal hearing to get the answer to how can I actually verify the accuracy of our Pepco bills? This is something that is supposed to be in Pepco's consumer pamphlet pursuant to the Consumer Bill of Rights. I didn't know any of this when I started. I just thought a meter reading was a meter reading. I didn't know anything about advanced metering infrastructures or meter data management systems, or the fact that you guys can take what you get into the UIQ database, apply different meter multipliers, put those into IEE or Itron database, and then for the portal, it goes through OPower, which is a Oracle database. And then the other one is it goes through SAP ISU to the back office billing. And so there's all of these layers where people can change the data, and they do, and they do, and it's not the same. And the numbers should add up because a meter reading should be a meter reading, right? I mean, that's what Dave, I think Dave Tandrecki, who is one of your supervisory uh, energy engineers who was on a call with me on April 22nd, 2025. And he said, well, if you have a problem, if they don't add up, call customer service and say they don't add up. They should add up. And I said, well, that's what I did on September 30th. And it's now April 22nd. And this is the first time anybody's speaking with me about this stuff. And anyway, it's just been this insane process. And I thought it was going to get better once the attorneys were involved because I did ITC litigation. I worked for one of the ALJs at the ITC. I know how administrative law proceedings operate. No, not at the commission. It's like this kangaroo court where Kunle Adeyemo says whatever he wants to say, and everybody's like, yes, sir, we're going to do that. It's what is even happening? You can't do this to customers. Um, I made it all the way from October 2nd to an informal hearing in January, which I don't even know if the commission's held an informal hearing other than in my case in like the last 10 years since Exelon took over. But I made it all that way just by observing Pepco's data. I didn't use anything from my system. That was the first thing Aaron Ayler did on October 2nd was call me and say, you can't use anything from your system, Miss Evans, and blah, 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 because that's behind the meter. Not to mention the fact that now I know that my interval stuff is at 0.2% accuracy and it is good enough to emit SREX. and the meters test for the commission for Pepco's meters is at 2%. So actually, my data is more accurate than Pepco's. Has to be. But I haven't used any of it. I haven't the whole time. But guess what? I put in a, oh my God, let's see. How long is my complaint? Oh, before I do that, let me just tell you that I have a 16.5 gigabit drive with 2761 files, 159 folders. And that's only part of the data that I have accumulated in the last 533 days. Um, but let's see, where is my complaint? My complaint is 368 pages, including exhibits. The Office of Consumer Services certified it for assignment to a hearing officer in response to my petition for a formal hearing. That was on January 23rd, 2025. Sorry, that was the date of mediation. The date it was certified was February 24th, 2025. It was served on Pepco on February 25th, 2025. And would you believe it? Pepco still has not answered my complaint on the merits. They filed a frivolous motion to dismiss by arguing that I was relying on data from my solar system, which I've never used. Um, so let's see. It's a complaint is 14 pages long. There are 47 exhibits. Nobody helped me prepare any of that, but thank goodness I am an attorney and I have done some of this stuff myself, so I know how to do these things. Um, and Mr. Adeyemo asked for 14 extra days because he said he wanted to, have time because my complaint was so long. But his response was so pathetic that it was just like, I don't, it's lawyers don't do this, except they do at the commission because the commission lets them get away with it. So it's, I, I just, I've never ever experienced anything like it. It's like, I would expect better in a third world country than the way that PHI's attorneys have acted in this litigation. Um, So they asked for more time. He put in this bogus response. The hearing officer orders a pre hearing conference, and the order says to be prepared to discuss the details, blah, blah, blah. Well, my OPC attorney says, oh, well, don't be surprised if he just blows you off because that's what he does all the time. And don't worry, we're working on a petition for solar customers. And I said, well, but I have like a case here that you could actually fix the system with. But no. Okay, well, I took an entire week and I prepared a PowerPoint presentation with all of my details and facts. And you know what, Mr. Mr. Antonio, the hearing officer from the PSC, wouldn't even let me speak. He just cut me off like immediately, over and over and over again, going, but Pepco said they fixed this, but Pepco said they fixed this. And I'm like, but uh, they didn't, and there's no proof of that. An attorney argument, like unsupported attorney argument, is not evidence. It's honorable, you know that. Maybe Mr. Adeyamo doesn't know that, but I mean, Anne Bancroft should certainly know that, but who cares? Because, the commission will let them get away with it. So, even when I told Mr. Antonio that during the meter test, the reading that was on Pepco's data from the quote unquote register reads, and the reading that was displayed on my meter were not the same. He cut me off and then he said, oh, well, they're within 2% apart, and that's within the threshold for the meter test. But the meter test is directed to the physical reading of like the electricity that passes. It's not this thing that like, oh, well, your meter has a display of one thing and Pepco has a different thing on their end. So I am just like, why is this guy protecting Pepco and not me? And then he had the audacity to order me to file a brief within 10 days. Within 10 days. And I said, "Oh, excuse me, sir, I'm going to be at spring break next week with my family at Disney World, right? Disney World. Expensive. Spring break with my family." And this guy, Mr. Antonio, says, "Oh, I figured 10 days." He was and, like, Mr. Adeyama did not say, like, "Oh, give her more time." Mr. Marinsek, my attorney from OPC, didn't say, "Oh, give her more time." It took everything that I had in my being not to scream at him that this was the Public Service Commission, not the Pepco Service Commission. So I muted my microphone, turned off my camera, and started sobbing. I mean, it was horrendous. It was. I, I have horrendous. Fortunately, I pressed enough that Mr. Antonio said, "Oh, well, I don't want to write an order that's all complicated on these technical details." So he ordered Pepco to meet with me, and Pepco wasn't available until April 22nd. So thankfully, I did get to go on to spring break, although I thought about Pepco the entire time. I actually dream about Pepco at night and meter readings. And if you don't believe me, you will by the end of this, because guess what? I know how y'all are committing billing fraud. I mean, I have it all down. It has to do with this. The UIQ readings come in and you guys make them match the raw data from the meter, right? But then you have to apply the same formula on both sides. And when that gets out of sync, guess what? The data's out of sync. So when the data doesn't match, that means that somebody applied the wrong pulse multipliers and all this other stuff. And then it gets even better because then the iTron data goes through the O power for the portal. And so at that point, you have yet another discrepancy between SAP and O power. Um, anyway, so so I convinced at that April 22nd meeting, um, I I convinced them to come and probe my meter to get the downloaded data. Now, they did try to do that 2 times before. The first time was right after the informal hearing when Linda Brown called me while I was on the way to go to Pittsburgh to see my dad because he just got diagnosed with cancer. Nobody from Pepco had called me or spoken with me ever. And I told her I was on the other line and I was driving. And she's like, "Oh, blah, 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 it's important." So I hung up with my friend and she asked a couple of things, but I was like, "No, you can't probe my meter till next week, blah, blah, blah." I get to my dad's house and didn't check my email, but as I was going to bed that night, I had an email from Linda Brown. Guess what? "We're coming to your house tomorrow and we're going to probe your meter." Like, why would they do that when I was out of town? My husband had to put duct tape on the meter to make sure nobody did it. And then guess what? When did they try to come again? The exact time that the informal hearing was taking place. I'm sorry, but like, Pepco is a public utility. I mean, I know Exelon's profits are the end all be all, but come on. Like, what would a normal customer do? I mean, I have a degree in electrical and computer engineering, and I spent like 20 years representing top semiconductor and technology companies in I-6 patent litigation. It is so skeezy what is going on. It's so offensive, and I just don't even know how to contain my disgust. And it gets worse because they're going to dismiss my case today because Kunle convinced them to use the OPC against me, and the hearing officer issued a bogus order dismissing my case on the grounds that I'm relying on my solar app data, which I never did. And he also uses the APA contested case burden of proof standard, which is funny because he won't hold a formal hearing. And as you know, on March 5th, the DC Court of Appeals held that uh, the rate increase in 2024 was vacated um, because Pepco pushed it through, and the commission let them. Because I mean, it's at this point, it it. I've never seen the commission. I've never seen anybody in DC work this hard to do anything. The commission actually just updated its consumer services webpage. I printed out the webpage, the PDF, on December 12th. And between then and the other night, at some point, they actually removed all of the comments about the Utility Consumer Bill of Rights being a binding document, and all the discussion about having a formal hearing. And they even removed the language where Pepco has to give written notice to people before they disconnect them. And you know, come on, you guys have to be responsible citizens. And this is disgusting. Not to mention the fact that, like, in the 1176 investigation, I just looked and, like, Anne Bancroft is like trying to force through an expedited hearing without even giving us public notice. Um, I could give you the statute number, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But like, I don't even think I got public notice the first time Pepco tried to push this through. And like, they're arguing against the vape. Pepco talks about having irreparable harm and it being unjust if it can't keep charging people the rates that were vacated. Pepco, even PHI, actually, because they're the ones arguing, they're trying to litigate the issues. They even cite this Watergate case that was cited in the Court of Appeals decision. That, like, obviously, if the Court of Appeals thought that that was relevant and you guys didn't have to, like, vacate your rates, they probably would have mentioned it. I mean, it is like the sleaziest, skeeziest, like, we're going to jam it through. Oh, we should be able to keep charging these rates that have been vacated. And you guys had like a 20% increase in shut off notices in December where you're disconnecting people's services for not paying their bills when those bills are based on, guess what? Inflated rates. I, I, I mean, and how can Pepco even say that it's going to be harmed by this? It was a $123 million rate increase, and I can tell you that in 2024, I believe it was like what, 84 million in increased profits from Pepco alone year over year. That's a 27% increase, and I think Exelon overall was only like 105 million. So it's like I think we're I have the number somewhere. I think that we're 919,000 uh, in Pepco, which is like Maryland and DC. And there's 11 million customers in all of Exelon. And the profits that you got from us represented 64% of the increased profits for Exelon overall in 2024. And but Pepco is going to have to decrease services in DC if this rate increase does not stay in effect. Well, people like me are having to pay higher bills. There are people who cannot afford this shit. Excuse my language, their services are being shut off. What is Pepco even doing? You have a duty. I don't care. I don't care if the Public Service Commission is willing to accept it. The Office of People's Counsel, who is also on your, oh my God, they're all on your side. And it's all just this like act, it's this sham insanity that I had no idea. I didn't know anything about this because nobody from Petco would talk to me. I started researching the docket because guess what? I'm an ITC lawyer and I did this back in 2005 when like that's when I started, and that wasn't a Westlaw or Lexis. So you had to use this like crazy docket and administrative law. And I figured out how to do it. And guess what? Since the Exelon merger, Pepco hasn't complied with any of its legal obligations. There's a continuing duty to update data requests. Nope, hasn't happened. And guess what? I know you guys are stealing solar energy. You are siphoning it from customers. You tried to do it with me. And if you updated that data request, guess what? It would give an answer. But nobody will ask you to do that because, I don't know, maybe somebody's paying them. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time because guess what? I spent too much time on this. I know all about Cold. I mean, what? Do you only hire women named Anne who like are willing to go to jail for Exelon's profits? I mean, it is the most disgusting display of, of just taking advantage of people. And, when I came back to DC in 2023, I left Big Law. I intentionally didn't go back because I wanted to help people. And I realized that I'm really, really good at figuring out these complicated issues. And I thought, well, maybe I can use this to like not only help myself, but like help everybody because so many crazy things are going on. But no, no, I have been literally tortured for 18 months. I haven't made any money. I spent 3,000 hours before OVC sandbagged me in December. And since then, I had to learn WordPress. I created a website. I've redacted all this stuff. I've made it publicly available. And guess what? The Attorney General, Brian Schwell's office. I talked to the attorney there for an hour who handles um, the stuff with PSC, and he basically said, "Oh well, that's just Petco. They don't do anything unless it's going to hurt their bottom line." And I said, "But I can prove they're doing billing fraud now, and they're not keeping sufficient records, which are crimes." And the answer was, "Oh well, that's never been prosecuted. The Department of Energy and Environment has known. My God, I reached out to them in December of 2024. They don't care." And the best was Charles Allen because I live on Capitol Hill. So I actually thought, wow, if Charles Allen is now in charge of the oversight committee for PSC and OPC, maybe somebody will take this seriously. And I testified on February 27th. I was one of the last people of the day. And at the very end, I just said, how do I offer more testimony? He said, oh, well, you can submit it in writing. I said, well, the hearing officer was supposed to hold a formal hearing in May 2025. It's almost a year ago. I haven't had the right to be heard. It's not really fair for you to ask me to submit more written testimony. I've put everything in writing again and again and again. And he said, oh, Ms. Livingston, I guarantee you I will ask about the handling of your case when the government witnesses testify next Thursday, which is the day that the Court of Appeals decision came out. And guess what? He didn't. He actually coddled Ms. Madhavu Fry. It was pretty pathetic. I mean, I know for a fact that like in FC 1050, here, let's pull up the FC 1050 and see what happened there. This February 4th, 2025, technical conference. Oh, it does not want to come up. Okay, there we go. This is after Margaret Moskowitz conducted the informal hearing on January 23rd, 2025. Um, everybody had already started like coordinating the plan. In fact, I actually think that when I talked to Pamela Nelson on January 9th, I think it was the next day, if I have my dates right, but it was the next day, all of a sudden Pepco wanted more time to prepare their answers to my questions. After they had delayed, the response was due in October. It was January, and Pepco needed more time to answer the questions because they had to come up with the right lies. And that was like the day after I had a long conversation with her, and she assigned Stephen Marensick to be my lawyer, who, well, OPC actually has done nothing but make my life harder and has now intentionally sandbagged my case. So on the February 4th technical conference in FC 1050, Brian Edmonds in the General Counsel's office was presiding. On behalf of the Office of the People's Counsel, Nia Tanner was there, who I had been in communication with before. Jason Cumberbatch, who is OPC's engineer, who, yeah, um, is I don't know whether he's like just best buddies with Pepco or what, but it's funny because like I said at one point watt instead of flat hour, and he was just like all over me for it. Like I'm the customer, and he's like feeding Kulayama like ridiculous. It's, it's just pathetic. Anyway, and then Pamela Nelson was on that call. And then on behalf of Pepco was Taylor Beckham, Kunle Adeyemo, and Peter Damrosch on the Department of Energy and Environment. Um, and it's crazy because when they instituted this schedule, I think I want to say it was on October 10th, 2024. Commissioner Beverly had a dissent where he said that he would recommend not having Pepco be in charge and letting everything happen off the record, which I'm pretty sure is a violation of FOIA and the information which must be made public because they're talking about rate making and not rulemaking. Sorry, not rate making. Okay, so it starts off, and Mr. Edmonds starts talking about how the commission's going to want transcripts and meeting minutes and all of this stuff. And then let's see, we get to page 10, and that's the meeting minutes. Okay. Then we get to page 68, and page 69. Page 69. So this is February 4th. My informal hearing was on January 23rd. And it says that last week, our Office of Consumer Services also notified us that some complaints they had received from customers. And I'm just going to kind of read through what I have. Some customers cannot go through the utility resolution process if no one is willing to address their concerns. That's me. And I think the concern is that they cannot speak to a Pepco Green Power Connect, Greedy Power Company Connect, group person with regard to billing complaints and inquiries. And a couple of people have indicated that they have not been able to speak with any GPAC staff, even after a complaint was filed with the commission and an informal hearing was conducted. Once again, that's me. And by the way, I have spent so much time on this that I know for a fact that in 2015, before the Exelon merger, they actually had a hearing where they addressed these exact things at the commission. Um, isn't it worse now? And then it says, and there were some assertions of Pepco not giving proper generation credits. Oh, that's me again. And then the Pepco My Account feature provides real-time solar generation, which some customers assert is inaccurate. I think that was a mischaracterization because actually I know you don't report on solar generation. That would be on net metering. And that was inaccurate too, because actually, I mean it was because that was part of my complaint. was that in October, after you guys allegedly fixed the problem, um, the online interval data, so that I had a generation of like negative, oh wait, it's written on my wall, uh, negative 262.82. But I got billed for negative 29. Finally, in November, they did credit me for negative 289.29, and the discrepancy between that 262, or well, 263 rounded up, and the 289, that is because right after I notified Pepco of the error on September 30th, when nobody would call me back, somebody in the advanced technology on your UIQ head-end system or somewhere in iTron, they actually added 30 kilowatt hours of credit on my October billing period right before they issued a falsified July 2024 billing period that your customer service had already told me was correct. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's you can't, because it's real. Okay. And then let's see. And then readings on the meter conflict with the readings provided by the utility. Oh, yeah, that happened too. And so then Brian Edmonds says that I've been asked to ask the company um, to respond to this within 15 days of today's meeting. So this is February 4th, 2025. And it says, this is a question that I know the commission is going to want us to flush out. I know this is not necessarily directly tied to this, but in some respects it is. And so, since we have the audience to address this, and I have been asked specifically to address these things brought to our attention, I want to make sure the company has an opportunity to see it and be able to respond to it. And then Nia Tanner from the Office of Consumer Services is like, I'm kind of shocked because I haven't heard all these things. And like, but she had, because I emailed her about them. And Pam Nelson was there too. And she knew, like, she's known since October, well, November 18th, the day after Pepper remotely changed the reading on my meter. To correct for this like factor of 10 things, decimal base shifting that you guys are doing to scam customers. Okay. And then Edmund says he's going to talk more to the Office of Consumer Services later. Taylor Beckham, just to make sure I heard you within 15 days of today. And then Mr. Edmund says, oh, you get to file it in blocks because, the commission does everything off the record, and Pepco's totally playing along with that. Even though you know better, you can't conduct it, but you're doing it. I keep saying that. You can't do that. But guess what? You are doing it because they're letting you. And like that does not absolve Pepco of its legal obligations. It's ridiculous. I even asked for like this framed tiered framework that allegedly was the foundation of the October 10th, 2025 notice in SC 1050 about the expiration of the solar credits. And one of the reasons I remember that date is because it was 10/10/24 that I notified the commission that Pepco's using the outdated net energy metering contract, just fraudulent inducement, but who cares? Um, and I asked Mr. Edmonds about it, and he told me I had to file public comments. Um, and I was waiting, right, to see what Pepco said before I did that, because what Pepco didn't file public comments on the thing that they were specifically ordered to respond to, I think by how actually I think it was Halloween. but 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 why would Pepco file anything publicly when they can hide it off the books and then get away with it? It's amazing how locked down you have this shit. once again, excuse my language, but like I've been going, I don't know how long for now, 50 minutes without like, without documents. Like I know this because I spent so much time on it. And this is not even getting into like the crazy stuff you guys are doing with like the pulse multipliers and then like the rounding up 15-minute intervals to inflate both use and excess gen so you can so you can overstate your estimates and your green energy targets, which I think is like interstate wire fraud, which same thing you guys had people go to jail for in Chicago type stuff. But I don't. Well, actually, I don't know that there was a manipulation of the exchange. That's a financial exchange that is being manipulated. You know. Okay, but anyway, so Mr. Edmonds says put it on box. And you have to follow the docket. We're just teeing it up here. And then Kunle and Almo, who, you know, he's rude. He's been so horribly mean to me. And like, he can't even spell my name right. I spent thousands of hours on this. And after I told Anne Bancroft about the billing fraud and that Kunle was lying about everything and that OPC was sandbagging me. And she was like, oh, but OPC's your lawyer and Kunle's handling it. He puts in a brief on January 15th, January 5th this year. It's just like, once again, a work of fiction. Lawyers can't do this. Oh, unless you work for Pepco or Pepco Holdings, because you can, because nobody cares except for me. And so I'm like doing something about it. I've spent all of this time okay, because you guys are screwing like every DC resident with this shit. So she's my language again. But come on. I'm like, I mean, I've never. I mean, I was like the associate that would, 2,400 hours, whatever it took. It's ITC litigation. Somebody dumps documents on you on a Friday afternoon of Labor Day weekend. Oh, wait, that's right. That's what Kunle and I all did, didn't we? Week before the follow-up conference, 2,500 pages of data request responses that, by the way, he knew he didn't have to submit because the hearing officer had said he wasn't going to rule on any motions. And so anybody who's like litigated and knows how this stuff works, why would you guys dump 2,500 pages at all? Like if you didn't need to, but it was like to placate, right? But it's funny because that stuff had enough that I pulled together the threads. And so that's how I know that Nadia Joyce manipulated all this stuff in SAP. And I reversed, like, I just looked up all the codes from SAP and I learned that. I learned how uh, IEE works. I even know that not validated data is unreliable data that cannot be used for billing purposes or forecasting. And guess what, Mr. Ayano is telling OPC that not validated means something more to me than it means to Pepco because things only get validated in SAP, which is not true. But even if it were, like, you guys turned off interval billing because you had a 99% checksum error. So, like, nothing you say is ever right. And, like, it is. And I can get rid of you because you're the exclusive electricity utility in the District of Columbia, and everybody in this city is letting you do all of this. So, like, for the rest of my life, I either have to just suck it up and ignore it, even though I know all of this crap is happening. I mean, it is so awful, Ms. Honorable. Oh, I hope you are. So, and then of course, Kinley comes in. We will be happy to respond. Blah blah blah. Well, guess what? Uh, Pepper didn't respond. And see, this was on February 4th. On February 14th, I got an email from Ms. Moskowitz that said that if I did not file my formal hearing complaint and petition for formal hearing within 7 days, that Petco's attorneys would move to dismiss my complaint and all this stuff, and they would have to get rid of it. So there you, I, I, I did it because that's I know the ICC litigators, but like it's just what you do. I don't do that anymore because I have a family and I actually wanted to not work that hard anymore. And um, all I do is Pepco. Like, I mean, it's right now. It's 4:24 a.m. and I am talking about Pepco. At least I'm talking about it instead of just writing something again. But anyway, so that was February 4th, right? And then I put my stuff in on February 21st. At that point, Pepco should have already put in their response to these questions that Ms. Moskowitz obviously raised about my case. Um, and they didn't. And then Taylor Beckham is that her name? She puts in a meeting minutes that says that Pepco is going to answer. But that was after the deadline, and Pepco never answered. And I even asked the OPC, my own attorneys, about this. Nobody says anything. It wasn't until August of 2025 when things started to get really weird, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting played here. Uh, um, I I sent a follow up on my FOIA request, and I found out, guess what? Nobody ever followed up on any of it. So why would the commission pretend to investigate the issues raised in my informal mediation, torture, circle of hell? I mean, like, Pepco should have answered on October 22nd, and I had to force the issue to get Pepco to an informal hearing on January 23rd, and even then, they wouldn't bring anybody from GPC billing. Margaret Moskowitz sent an email on December 31st, and then again on like January 2nd, telling Linda Brown that like I'm just like nice, easy to deal with person, and I'm an engineer, and I'm a lawyer, and I've been studying the meter manual, and I really just want to understand my bills. But no, but no. The answer was it's been reviewed for accuracy and deemed correct. Now, after you guys like changed my billing twice already and made it worse before you made it better, like it, why would I trust anything in it anyway? Your rate schedule for residential schedule R says that watt hour meters will be read to the nearest multiple of the meter constant and bills rendered accordingly. I assume I said that correctly, but that was from memory. That's what Mr. Adriano secretly told OPC in, I think it was an email on from November 12th, 2025, which nobody ever sent me. And I actually just got yesterday or the day before because I asked about it. He actually says that the meter constant, which is KH on the Clara I-210 plus C, the KH is 10.0. There's a KT of 1.0. And Mr. Adeyamo said that the KE, which is the software conversion on the intervals to take pulse data into kilowatt hours, he said that was the KH and that it was 1.5. And that would be fraud on the tribunal. I don't care who, like, I don't care if OPC wanted to believe him He is an attorney for Petco Holdings. And there's a transcript from November 5th where he feigns ignorance. I mean, it is like, you've got to be kidding me. Here, let's just see. Let's pull up some of these things that he said. Oh, I got 2-page view on my PDFs. So let me pull this to fit to one page, move that over there. Okay. And then Jason Cumberbatch, the engineer who basically refused to. I filed my case in February. They kept telling me he was going to talk to me, but I think it was October before late September maybe before he spoke with me. Uh, I've identified what she believes is a multiply of 1.5. Um, Finley says, I have no idea what you're referencing. And what she's pointing out shows this 1.5 multiplier. Now, what's really funny about that is that that came from the pulse data that Pepco probed from my meter on, I want to say May 8th. And then from May 8th, they had it for well over a week before they gave it to me. And then it's a very weird data set. They didn't give me any of the logs or anything. And I think they might have reverse engineered because there's not a straight line multiplier being applied to my count. But anyway, that those tables actually say there's this conversion multiplier of 0.0015, which is weird because that's not standard. Um, then let's see. Then Kinley says, I can't say if it's 1.5 because I don't know what you guys are pointing to. And that there can be different pulses based on different meter manufacturers. And I know you only use 2 meters in DC. I don't know what the other one is, but like, come on. And then Jason Cumberbatch points him to the page. Um, and and this again, I'm telling you, it's horrible. Finlay says, is that something she put in there? Yeah. I just want to make sure. Is that something that she manipulated? Like, what is wrong with the PHI General Counsel's office that I have been nothing but honest and accurate? And she wouldn't even bother to discuss it with me directly. Wait, here, yeah, I forgot about that one. So this is like the secret proceedings that OPC and Pepco had my own attorney excluding behind my back, which they also did when I got ordered to file my first brief, but we'll talk about that later. Um, so, so at the follow-up conference, seven months after my complaint was filed, after I was ordered to file a brief that Pepco still hasn't answered, because they can't, because they'd have to admit billing fraud. And the complaint that I filed has not been answered. At this follow-up conference, the hearing officer says, I'm not allowed to file anything anymore. I can't advocate on my own behalf. I have to rely on OPC. And he wants to hear OPC's opinion on the matter. Mr. Lawrence Daniels, the director of OPC, assures me that they will represent my interests. My brief will not be, somebody will respond to that. And he says I'm being denied due process. Oh my God, Finlay has all these weird arguments that, like, we'll get into that later. So a factual dispute. Oh, we estimated your bills all this time. But the hearing officer can decide who has the better way to estimate. And I guess he's saying it's like a matter of law because Petco's method of estimation only has to be reasonable. I mean, are you kidding me? he did go to law school, right? Um, so so he and the hearing officer Noel Antonio, they were like finishing each other's sentences at the follow-up conference. Actually, it's funny because like 36 hours before it happened, I sent an email to OPC where I was like, I can hear Mr. Antonio now. He's going to order me to file a second brief and only give me 5 days this time. Um, but I did get ordered to file a second brief because, Pepco needed a mulligan because it can't substantiate anything it does with factor law. Oh my God. It's so bad. It's not funny. But like, I have to believe you're a real lawyer, Ms. Honorable. I thought Miss Bancroft was. But like, when you tell the general counsel of Pepco Holdings, I mean, I'll go through the PowerPoint with you later. Like, details with like employee names and register numbers and all this stuff of how the fraud's going down. And she's like, oh, okay. And then Pep was in another brief. By the way, not according to the rules. It's not. There's no verification. It's not supported by anything other than attorney argument. But it's just full of lies. And again, you can't do that because it's the DC Public Service Commission and they're going to let you do it. So if you're not going to be honest and ethical, you're going to get away with it. Okay. So after this follow-up conference, well, at the follow-up conference, like the relief requested, here's the relief requested in my complaint with all these exhibits that nobody's ever answered. I asked for a method or means to independently verify the accuracy of our Pepco bills, including those issued to date and bills issued in the future. I asked for an accurate and transparent response to my formal complaint, including responses to all the questions and concerns raised directly with Pepco, raised in my extensive correspondence with the commission, and raised in the exhibits to this formal complaint. I asked for detailed information about Pepco's programming of my net energy meter, including all meter settings and configurations. I asked for Pepco to explain why Pepco refused to discuss my complaint with me. It insisted that I document all my questions and concerns in writing, and then refused to answer those questions and concerns after I complied with Pepco's unduly burdensome requirement that everything be documented in writing. How dare I? What an answer to that. And then, okay, a detailed accounting of Pepco's handling of my complaint, including the identification of all actions Pepco has taken since 9/30/2024 when I notified it. I mean, just a horrible person asking for these awful things. And then explain if there is an efficient process to get Pepco to discuss, investigate, and attempt to resolve complaints the next time I have a question or concern. Explain if there was anything else that I could have done to get Pepco to respond to my complaint on the merits at any time over the last 5 months. And then my last one, number 7, was that I requested the commission to institute an investigation into Pepco's abusive solar billing practices and failure to comply with the Consumer Bill of Rights. Now, nobody helped me with this one, and I researched the law extensively because why would I waste my time if I knew I couldn't get relief? Like, so I made sure. And then I even, tied things to footnotes with, this is a very complicated story with what happened to me. I mean, let me let's see. Where's one of the explanations you guys put in here? A processing step was missed that impacted the bill to reflect the incorrect calculation of kilowatt hour usage on the meter and the excess generation information based on the meter reading data presented on the bill on page 2. Do you know what that means? And guess what? Because I'm a patent litigator, I used to have to define words as a matter of law based on how they were used in context. So I have all sorts of knowledge about Pepco's use of shady language. And I know that I think it's IRAC has a blog post that I think Commissioner Beverly cited in his 1010 24 FC 1050 investigation thing about how Pepco is known for exploiting uh, gray areas and gray areas and gaps in the law. But what's crazy is that like I didn't know any of that at the time, but as I learned some of this stuff, I'm thinking, well, but how how like they can't do that, right? Because this is a meter reading issue. So somewhere there actually has to be a meter reading, right? Nope, you guys don't have one. I mean, you do somewhere because clearly you could withstand an audit, I think. I mean, because that would be way too blatant. All of these things are like so just like cleverly, cleverly this way and cleverly that way. And I found too many of them. And what happened was I found one, and then instead of fixing it, they made it worse. And then that just exposed one after the other. And you can see this stuff happening on the portal. Like just you just have to be you just have to be diligent, relentless enough to capture all of it. But it's crazy because I mean, like the footnotes all go to like violations of the Consumer Bill of Rights. And I even talk about this thing with when they revised my July bill, how the numbers didn't make sense. In particular, that like the original bill, since it was my first solar bill, was at zero, but when they revised it, it was at five. And then when they fixed this factor of 10 thing, they I actually had told them about my original complaint. And in fact, had caught back on June 26th, like 36 hours after it was implemented. I just didn't know it at the time. And there's a recording of that call. But anyway, so then it goes from zero. This is the bill that customer service had already told me on a call, which I do have a recording of as well, because Finley gave it to me. Finley gave me three of them. He kept the ones that he thought were incriminating. And refused to produce those. But anyway, so five, and then in November it goes to 55. And I just kept saying, how does my first solar bill start at a meter of 55? And guess what? When Nadia Joyce put in the numbers from, she got them from IEE to put into SAP, and it was the June 26th midnight read, not the um, not the June 25th midnight read. And I think I need to show you this one because this is just craziness. Let's see. Um, does that pull my Adobe up? Oh, look at that. It does. Um, I assume this is working. I've never actually, I hate being on camera. I don't do social media. Um, what are you going to do? And I'm not going to accept a fraudulent pep people the rest of my life. So I got to do something. Okay. So this first one here is what the bill originally was. And so the negative 145 is in July, negative 54, and then negative 50. Um, I actually told Pepco that, I mean, it's in my complaint, literally five little asterisk, like three line things that tell you exactly what it was doing. So I told it was 530. It's what it should be. And then I said on the 50, I didn't have the data downloaded before the bill was generated, but I knew that based on my meter, I was about 500. I feel like it was 498. But instead of fixing this right away, guess what they did? Oh, wait, I'm not pointing at that, am I? Oh well, my arrow is not working, but that's okay. Um, let's see. Or maybe we'll do this. It'll be easier if I point at things, I'm sure. So let's see. Start me off. And uh, uh, no, 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 not that one. Sorry, but I'm doing this in one take because I don't have time for this crap. Okay, so um, let's see. Is my mouse moving now? I think it is. Okay, so it was 1:45 in July. I have a phone call telling me that that 1:45 is correct. This one, the 54, was the one that I have data that says 5:38, but downloaded from the portal on September 24. That's the one that I thought should be around 500. Now, what did the uh, Greedy Power Company, that's what they call it, GPC, because I think the only thing that GPC does is like commit billing fraud. I mean, it's pretty crazy because nobody ever calls you back. And I sent all of these emails to GPC billing, and customer service sent emails to GPC billing. And instead of fixing this, when you reissued bills on October 4th, somebody not only like sanitized the record of the stuff I had sent, but they sanitized what had been sent from the commission. Because when Linda Brown told Natia Joyce, there was no information about what's really going on. And I think that's how you guys are getting away with all of this because your employees are so siloed, they only know their aspect of it. And in fact, this year, after Pepco deemed everything correct, it said it found 19 kilowatt hours that it owed me, and it put it in June. And from the SAP records, I know they had not to Joyce do that, but I'm guessing that it said 19,000 watt hours because it got entered as 19,000 kilowatt hours, which is 19 megawatts. So my June bill issued, my June bill of 2025 issued with a 19 megawatt hour credit for solar in addition to my other credits. So that's pretty crazy. Um, but anyway, so somebody decided that, oh, no, 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 August and September are fine. In other words, you intended to inflate by 90%. And oh no, we got to change July. Well, the problem is that, look at this. Oh my goodness. All right, on 6/25, when my June bill ended, this is the 1809. And then look, somebody pushed a firmware here at uh like 12:55 a.m. And I know this now because I've studied this enough that anytime there are these off cycle things, it means that you guys, like, if it's not a 0 0 read, it means somebody's doing something. So then on 6/25 at 14:11, look at this. The register readings, they get reduced by a factor of 10. These register readings that, oh, Pepco cannot change. Oh, but you did. So I am so sick of hearing, oh, register readings are, you know, immutable and blah, blah. They're inviolate. Well, they're not because you guys changed it and you did it intentionally. And here's what's even better. At 16:53, guess what? That's me calling because my June bill issued with it's at 1789. It wasn't even 1809. 1781. It's funny because I have the transcript of that here, which I'll show you in a second. Um but she told me that the 1789 that ran before midnight, so the meter reading was unavailable. So it went from 0 to unavailable. My meter was replaced on 5/21 as the result of it had a bad display. And so they started the June bill at 0, even though the old meter was installed 12 hours earlier. which is another issue that Pepco still won't explain since it didn't put those features on the bill. Um, so anyway, so we got 625, 14, 11, right? They go down. So this means right here, this is when my meter was programmed for NEM, right? Because this is the meter update. Now, this is my phone call. When I was on the phone, um, she told me, she pinged the meter and she gave me this reading right here, 1878689. Um, but let's see. Hang on. Um, where is it? Because I was sitting in front of the meter and I am the type of person who takes pictures of things because I'm used to documenting stuff. So while I was on the phone with her, my meter says 178, right? Well, she gave me this 187 and would not take my meter reading. She said, like, because I was like, but how did you get this 1781? And that's way higher than any of our old usage. And she said something like it looks like it was a test run because they ran the bill before midnight. Well, that's just weird. Test run for what? Oh, wait, programming my meter to be reduced by a factor of 10. So, all right. So and then look at this. If we go here at 1653 and they get this 1653, guess what the total is if you take this number and subtract that number? Oh, it's 178. So before I even called, my net metering was on. My meter was registering. My install was done on the 24th and the 25th. I subsequently asked about this, the whether it was on or not. That's when I got to talk to Mr. Honesty. Now, Kunle withheld that transcript, that recording from me, but the answers that Pepco provided on January 22nd actually say that for the recorded call with customer service on 6/26/24, Ms. Levinson contacted the utility to inquire if her solar panels were working. Actually, I called because Pepco issued a estimated June bill that was like exorbitant, and I just didn't understand why I would have an estimated bill with a new meter, right? If it's a smart meter. And it says the customer service representative advised the meter was reprogrammed for net on 6/25/24 and that nothing else was needed for the net metering process. Now, my electrical inspection did not occur until July 11th, 2024. So Pepco interconnected me early. I actually said, and we can go to that transcript right now. I won't play the recording for you, but I did PD. I transcribed it and made a PDF. Okay. So here's me saying, like, I got it. It's twice last month. I don't understand why it's estimated. Then, um, she says it's unavailable, and then she says it's estimated. She pings it. Blah 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 blah. Um, And then I said, I don't think you guys have turned on the net metering yet. I know that takes like 10 days or something, right? So here I am being absolutely honest and truthful. And then guess what Mr. Adeyemo does in every single response and like over and over again. And he's even doing it like in the 1050, um, in the 1050 formal case, because Peter Damrosch told me that basically I was being blamed for turning on my system early. I didn't even know that was a thing because guess what? Pepco's website hasn't been updated in 10 years. And so your website actually says that net metering gets programmed immediately before the meter goes live. And I actually checked my contract because my contract says that the estimated commissioning date for net metering was on June 28th. And this was June 26th. So I thought everything was fine. And then guess what? Mr. Ayamo over and over and over again has blamed me for everything that's gone wrong. And so on this call, I actually tell her that, my meter is like, like I thought the meter was supposed to be reduced by a factor of 10 based on this call. She says, okay, the 24th. Didn't know. Oh, so if it has unavailable, it means that you ran the bill before the data updated, which is weird because from what I understand, well, actually, yeah. So when it says unavailable, that means that you didn't wait for the register reading, and so you're just billing straight on interval. So that didn't pass the checksum, and so if the policy that is official is that you will read within 3 days. Why would Pepco ever run a bill with an unavailable reading? If it wasn't like at the 3 day limit, it's because Pepco pushes through bills that don't pass the validation rules. And on my account, it turns out that every reading from July 1st, 2023, when I established service, until 8/25/2025, when Petco ran the report, every single meter reading was not validated. And you can't make this stuff up, man. I mean, when after I filed my brief and he couldn't answer anything about, like, that's it. Pepco's the utility. It's their burden to tell me what I use based on a meter reading. So it's not my job. It's not my job to figure out what the meter's supposed to read when Pepco tells me that the displayed reading and the portal reading aren't what they have to bill on. And he even says that the regulations, there's no such regulation, but he says that Pepco has to bill on the validated data that it receives from the meter. And what's funny is then he like gives me all data that's not validated. And then that was in June 9th was when he filed the first. Well, that was the second frivolous renewed the renewed motion to dismiss. Um, and then after the hearing officer ordered OPC to write a brief on my behalf, because I didn't let OPC sandbag me the first time. I'm sorry. It's so bad. It's just so bad. I mean, like, what is even happening here? Um, and I lost my train of thought. I'm gonna take a break for a second because I think I've been going like non-stop for an hour and 28 minutes. And I hope to God that this thing actually like recorded because if it did, I'm gonna be really pissed. I will be back in a minute.